dating at around 2300 BC. So here this makes the Hebrews much older than what scholars say. And here it states the Ebla language shows close linkage to the biblical Hebrew. And this also proves that the Hebrew language was not taken from Kemet like some scholars try to address, but originated from the Eblaite language. This new discovery of Ebla is going to shake the foundation of the lies about the Hebrews that's floating around. Now, before the Israelites came into Kemet, they lived in Syria, and this new discovery of Ebla is going to prove this. To further prove this Eblaite language is the origin of the Hebrew language, the professor stated, perhaps of greater interest are such names as Ishmael and Israel, born by ordinary flesh and blood citizens of Ebla 2300 BC. So here we have historical proof that in these clay tablets that the names of Ishmael and Israel were occupying this area before 2300 BC, and these names were regular names of natural-born citizens of that land. That would put the time of Abraham before 2300 BC. And as I read in the story of Abraham, that when God instructed Abraham concerning Isaac's wife, Abraham was told by God to go to the land of thy forefather, Syria, as it states in the first book of God, chapter 8, verse 8. It states, send thy servant to the land of thy fathers, and I will send my angels with thy servant, and he shall come to a maiden who shall be Isaac's wife. So Abraham called his servant, who was overseer of his goods, and he said to him, equip thyself with camels and asses, and with servants, and with jewels I will give thee, and go thou to Syria, the land of my fathers, and bring a damsel hither, who shall be Isaac's wife. So here it states that Isaac's wife came from Syria, which ties into the city of Ebla located in Syria, and it's also the land of the forefathers of Abraham. Now, the professor also stated the Eblaite mentions of familiar Palestinian places names such as Hazar, Megiddo, Jerusalem, Lachish, Dor, Gaza, Ashtaroth. Several of these places are known archaeologically to have been inhabited towns in the 3rd millennium BC, which is 3000 BC. So here it states these cities going back to 3000 BC, and Sodom and Gomorrah took place in the time of Abraham, which would place the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah around 3000 BC. Now the Italian professor has classified the new language Ebla as early Canaanite or Paleo-Canaanite, which is where the Hebrew language stems from. So here we see where the Canaanite language stems from the Ebla language, and this is the origin of the Hebrew language stemming as far back to 3000 BC. And I will do a documentary on this subject proving the Hebrew Israelites in pre-dynastic times. Now we're going to move into Arabinya. Verse 7. Arabinya had 4 kinds of people within her regions: the Ahuans, the Lycians, the Ians, and the brown burrowers in the ground, with long noses and projecting mouths, very strong, whose grip of the hand could break a horse's leg. The brown people, though harmless, were naked, living mostly on fish and worms and bugs and roots, and they inhabited the regions of the great river Tua, or Nile. Over these people, to subdue them and destroy them, Osiris eluded his great angel general Egypt, servant of DYUS. Egypt called the region of his eludement after himself, Egypt, the same which is corruptly called Egypt to this day. So here it shows the origin of the name Egypt. He was an angel under the command of Osiris. Verse 8. In the time of Abraham, this country was called South Arabinya, but when in after years the great scholars entered the records in the king's library, the later names were used, being written in the Phoenician language and not Egyptian, which was the language of the unlearned. So here it shows that during the time of Abraham, Egypt was not the name, but South Arabinya, a name stemming from the Phoenician language. Verse 9. But the chief part of all the people in Arabinya were Ahuans, of color and size and figure like the Persians, being also the offspring of the Ians and the brown earth burrowers, the Houdas, from whom they inherited corporeal greatness, even as from the Ians they inherited holiness of spirit. But the flatheads had mostly disappeared from Arabinya, and these are during pre-dynastic times before Menes. This time could be the time of the Scorpion Kings and the third period of the Naqada era in Kemet, and not too much is known when we try to research this time period going back before 3200 BC. Verse 10. And here were thousands of cities, great and small, even as in Persia and Hellas, and they had colleges and houses of philosophy, even like Persia, besides thousands of public libraries which supplied books freely to the poor, who came here to be taught in the sciences and in the arts of painting and engraving and sculpture, and in astronomy and mathematics and chemistry and minerals and assaying, and in the rules for inventing chemical combinations. But the Lycians were the only people who dealt in charms and sacred of taming serpents and beasts by virtue of the hand and by curious scent, prepared secretly, and the Lycians maintained the fifth rite in the resurrection, whereby on the fifth day after death the soul appeared in mortal semblance to his living people and advised them lovingly, after which he ascended in their burning incense going to Jehovah. So here it shows Kemet in pre-dynastic times was just advanced as we are today. And this time period is before the first king Menes. The time of Menes proves that there was wars going on which coincide with these battles of 1,000 years. And these wars that were going on in that time proves there were civilizations going back before Menes. Now during this time, these three countries were all well developed as modern civilizations. In Kemet, in Persia, and in Syria, and Hellas. And in Syria you had the city of Ebla where the Hebrews originated from, all stemming from pre-dynastic times, going back to about 3000 BC. And each of these three countries had these four branches of different tribes. You had certain tribes who lived in the forest, you had certain tribes who lived in the cities, and you had certain tribes who herded sheep. And these were the daily lives, and you could see these painted on the walls, especially in Kemet, whose architectural structures survived in best shape during these wars and battles of 1,000 years. Verse 11. Of such like then were the people over whom DYUS, named Lord God, had set his 1,000 millions to subdue them for his glory. Now coming back to the armies of DYUS, it is these countries that he will overturn to start his establishment on earth. And thus it came to pass, Jehovah spoke in Cryosha, saying, the time shall come when angels and mortals shall know of a race of Ahuans on the earth in Gautama, which is America, even till the era of Cosmon, which is now. And men and angels shall see and understand that man of himself never invented a god in figure of a man born of woman, and that only through the inspiration of my enemies who build kingdoms in Hades for their own glory hath any people ever fallen from my high estate to worship a god in the image of man. And with that, I'd like to say peace and blessings, and catch you on the next documentary called The Assault Raids of Osiris, showing how the angels influence mortals to cease worshiping the great spirit Jehovah and to start worshiping DYUS through the different deities in the armies of DYUS. And with that, shalom.